Hello, hello. Welcome to Fireside Chat Fridays with Voices for a World Free of Nuclear Weapons. We are back with another phenomenal guest who will just be joining us shortly. Welcome to all of our viewers who are tuned in today. We are very excited for today's session, and we will just be starting in a few minutes. As always, feel free to drop comments and questions in the chat below, and we will do our best to raise them with our speaker. Hello, Vincent, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, hi, can you hear me, Anin?
I can hear you very, very well. Thank you so much for joining us. It's super early in Malaysia.
Yeah, I think it's about 5:13 a.m. right now, but I'm
Oh,
actually quite privileged to be part of the today's sharing program.
oh, thank you, thank you. Well, I'm very grateful, and I'm sure our listeners are also that you were able to make it today, and we're very excited to hear your perspective. So I'm just going to do a very quick introduction, and then we'll jump right in if that's okay with you.
Cool, yeah, let's go ahead with that.
Perfect. For folks tuning in for the first time, my name is Haneen, and I'm representing Voices for a World Free of Nuclear Weapons. I'll be your host for today's live with our guest, Vincent. Vincent is, as we said, currently in Malaysia, and he is a co-founder of the Global Youth Cooperation Circle under the United Religions Initiative. He works to bring young people together from all over the world to learn about and work towards a world free of nuclear weapons. He's representing Malaysia for us today, and I really cannot wait to hear his perspective about young people around the world. So, just for a quick introduction to Voices, again, for folks who are joining for the first time, Voices is an interfaith and intercultural group advocating for nuclear abolition from an intergenerational, ethical, and faith-based perspective. Our leaders, and Vincent is one of them, span from youth leaders to seasoned diplomats and politicians. We invite you to share these moments with us during Fireside Chat Fridays as we talk about this issue and our role with different leaders and thinkers who are shaping and changing the nuclear abolition landscape. So as always, please ask questions, share comments as we go behind the scenes on Vincent's story and what he thinks is most important right now. This video will be available to view after this broadcast, and thank you again for tuning in today. So Vincent, thank you for joining us. I'm going to jump right in and ask you what prompted you to join Voices for a World Free of Nuclear Weapons, and how has it changed your view and perception of this issue?
Right, well, firstly, I like to, give my thanks to Hanin for organizing this wonderful session because I think without her effort, we wouldn't be able to have wonderful speakers for the past few weeks to actually listen and as well as to learn from them. Now, just to come back with the question that you actually asked us, why did I actually join in nuclear voices, right? Well, the main reason was because there was this moment last year itself, or about 2 years ago, where the youth group of the URI, we actually have this event where each of us actually share about some of the initiatives that we do in the areas of interest. And it just so happened that one of the areas which I've actually been involved in is actually the anti-nuclear movement. And some of the things which I've actually done includes some of the sharings through exhibition and so on. And it was through this one particular event that we actually had in the URI platform. And because of that, Monica, who was actually one part of the voices, she actually, impressed, rather she was excited to actually see some of the stories which I've actually shared on the platform, and she actually invited me to be part of the voices, as a fellow youth, and
Mm,
as well as to contribute some of the fresh ideas as well,
mm,
perhaps some of the inspiration which I've actually gotten through our movement as well.
yeah.
And that's how it all got started.
Cool, cool. That's I think we owe Monica thanks for bringing in such great folks, and I think she was able to join us on our Fireside chats a couple of weeks ago. So we really, we benefited from her experience and her knowledge on some of these issues. And I I I guess, so that kind of like does lead to my second question, which is, you know, um, again, you're calling in from Malaysia today, and I'm just curious how, some of the young people around you, what are they saying or doing or thinking about this issue? And, how have you seen, like, from this unique viewpoint that you have, because you're plugged into these global networks, you're plugged into voices, and you're also, closely familiar with the thinking in your part of the world. How have you seen those perspectives maybe change over time? What are people saying or thinking, and how does how does the nuclear issue kind of sort of inform the public consciousness in that part of the world right now?
Right. I think that's actually a very good question when we actually reflect on different parts of the world.
Hmm.
Now, when we talk about Malaysia's context, right, because I'm actually part of some of the movements over here.
Hmm.
One of the things which I actually notice is, generally speaking, right, I don't think that issues apply in Malaysia, but generally speaking, most of the global citizens or the people of the earth, we kind of do not prioritize the importance of the anti-nuclear simply because it is not something that is close to us. So to me, if you were to ask like how do the general population actually view about this thing here in Malaysia specifically, I would say that we tend to have the lack of awareness on this issue, that we didn't really know how close is this issue to us. So I would say that most of us do have an idea of what is that, but we don't really know how does it really affect us and why we should be concerned about it. And how do I actually got to know this actually throughout my some of the things we've actually done through my lay Buddhist organization, Sokarakai Malaysia,
Hmm.
which I myself actually volunteered quite a number of hours in it to actually to help out to do certain sharing through a form of exhibition, which we
Hmm.
call it as Everything We Treasure. And
Hmm.
it so happened that we actually went to universities, high schools, and even to certain corporates as well as government institutions. Then when we do that kind of sharing, you'll be surprised to know that quite a number of them were like, oh wow, I didn't know about that. I didn't know
Hmm.
that the threat of nuclear weapon is real and something that could actually affect people, even though it's our country itself is not a nuclear state. We don't really have that nuclear weapon over here. But I kind of think that the awareness is actually slowly being raised in the sense that more and more people are actually talking about this thing. However, to me, is that there's going to be a lot more work before we have the general population of Malaysia to actually be aware of that. But in a way, I would say that those certain group of scholars as well as certain parliament members or maybe the government institutions here in Malaysia, they're quite aware of how these things are actually being affected. And this is actually one of the reasons why Malaysia was actually part of the ratification of TPNW. It's simply because of the foreign minister, he himself also is actually quite aware of the issue, and that is why he actually pushed through it. And eventually, we were one of the countries that actually rectified the TPNW during that particular progress. So, to put things into perspective, I would say, generally speaking, the population of Malaysia, well, not really, in line with I mean, aware of what's actually happening, but I would say that actually a growing awareness towards it, and quite a number of people, particularly the government institution as well as a certain group of citizens here in Malaysia, we are actually well aware of that. Yeah.
Great, great. No, thank you for helping inform us and folks who are listening about some of the thinking around this in that part of the world. And I guess I just wonder, Vincent, like, has there been do you think that poses this level of this differing levels of awareness, in different parts of the world. Do you feel like that poses some challenges as you do some of your work, or is there an opportunity there for international youth groups such as the one that you have co-founded, and for Voices and other nuclear related efforts that are happening? Do you think there's an opportunity there for some of these people to be more deeply engaged and to take a maybe a stronger interest perhaps, or some or to direct some more efforts towards maybe non-nuclear weapon states such as in Southeast Asia? Do you really have any feelings around that?
Well, personally, right, I kind of feel that this, I mean, in order for us to totally eliminate nuclear weapon, which is actually one of the things I actually hope, to happen in the near future, it is not something that can only be done with nuclear state, countries, but I would take it as a collective effort from people around the world. Because the thing is, not only endangers, certain countries, but it actually endangers people around the world, because we just have to push a button, we wouldn't know where we actually explode. Even neighboring countries will actually be affected. And in fact, there was this actually simulation which actually been done in one of the research, whereby they actually try to simulate what happens if there's actually a nuclear war between Sri Lanka and India. So through that simulation, is like after 1 month or so, right, the impacts that they actually have is actually spread out throughout the whole world, which I kind of feel that people have to be aware of that. It's not like I have a war like what is actually happening in certain part of the world right now, where they're actually having war, but it's actually we from Malaysia is not really directly impacted in that sense because it's actually quite far from us. But I kind of feel that this type of ignorance per se, I would use the word ignorance because we are not really immersing ourselves to know what is actually really happening out there and how does it actually affect us. So when this thing happens, right, we tend not to put priority in that area of importance, because generally speaking, most of us are actually quite involved with environmental issues, social issues, justice, and as well as other things that are actually happening around the world. And in fact, right now here today, right, in this year itself, in 2021, I think one of the most pressing issue that everyone is actually talking about or combating against is actually the COVID-19 issue. So there's lack of room to think about other things, because this is actually something which is crucial. So going back to that point, right, whether this is something that we can actually work into and there's any space for youth, or maybe for people from different generations to actually work on it, I kind of feel that there's still a lot of room for us to actually work on it, because not only that we need to work towards the future of world without nuclear weapon, but at the same time we kind of need to prepare a world post of a nuclear weapon. Because to be honest with you, right, I'm a little bit concerned, like what's going to happen when people do stop, like what will happen if, let's say, one day someone actually raised the issue again, all right? Let's say that, I think we should actually reserve ourselves with 1 or 2 nuclear weapons just in case something happens. And then that kind of chain will actually eventually continue to propagate to different countries, which will be a huge major concern, because if you actually put in so much effort in stopping this thing, and if somehow or other one of the two power holders, maybe certain political parties, they have this perception, and eventually they will start to create nuclear weapons again, and then the cycle will repeat again. So I kind of feel that a lot of room for us to actually get involved, particularly in the sense that we need to create a frontliners where we actually continue to educate people why this effort has actually been made to stop, as well as to prevent the creation as well as the test of nuclear weapon, so that in hope the future generation would actually understand what is actually happening, and will actually continue on this thing, for the next the whole future of the human population, I would say.
Right.
Because the thing is, even though we learn in history the dangers of World War, like in what actually happened in World War I, World War II, but in today's society, we do still see people raise weapons, to go for war, because of certain things, like perhaps on a personal greed or maybe personal agenda. But although it has been recorded in history that this is something that we shouldn't be involved in, but people are actually still doing it. So I would say that there's a tendency for a nuclear weapon to actually experience the same cycle again. So that's why I kind of feel that we ourselves, as people who are actually quite aware of what's actually happening, we have the responsibility to actually continue on educating people why this thing is something that, it has to be a continuous effort, and not that, once we actually achieve that, we just put a full stop there. Yeah.
Great. No, that's incredible, because I think your point, Vincent, about that that this goal is not like a hard stop, right? Like we've met a goal, and we can that's like end of the road for us, right? Like there is a world beyond um, this this sort of maybe current system that's in place, that can be first envisioned and imagined, and then actually brought into existence. So I think that's a really incredible point that you've raised, and something that I think Voices for a World Free of Nuclear Weapons has also been talking extensively about. That we're fighting a certain a challenge and a difficulty that that nuclear weapons represent for like you said, not just nuclear weapon states but non-nuclear weapon states as well. But at the same time, what are we building and what are we creating um, to uh, to start fresh, to start new, And so thank you for sharing that. And so I guess that ties in with some more questions that were on my mind as I was thinking through our conversation. What is your goal or your hope, for some of this nuclear abolition work moving forward? What have we, whether at Voices or just the movement as a whole, or just in your experience, what have we, as people, what have we been doing right, and what more should we be doing to help sort of push the needle on this?
Well, I kind of feel that because the thing is, I'm actually a firm believer of education, in the sense that if any individual were to be given with a proper, I would say that adequate, or rather a suitable education system, or maybe a suitable educational knowledge, if it's actually embedded well, or maybe if someone actually learns well on the implication, they will actually bring it throughout their whole life. So to me, it's like one of the things which I actually envision is, in order for us to really put a full stop, maybe just to make this thing happen, is we might need to implement this anti-nuclear movement thing into classroom lessons, because that's the only way that we can actually build future generations. I mean, we do talk about dangers of chemicals, chemical weapon, war, but we don't really specifically talk about the dangers of nuclear weapon. I don't know what's the exact reason as to why we don't do that, but I kind of assume that probably because it only happened once, during the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that people actually talk briefly in textbooks. Like in Malaysia also, we do talk about that. But I kind of feel that there's actually a need of more emphasis, like, well, what will a world, be if, let's say, nuclear weapon were to continue on the next, a millennia or maybe a century later on? Because this will actually give people an idea, like how dangerous this nuclear weapon could be. And I mean, just like I wouldn't say my recent engagement, but probably throughout the past few years, right? I kind of noticed that the younger generation, especially, well, kind of feel like we're old, right? But the younger generation, right? People are actually quite aware on the dangers of, like smoking, for instance. If I would take an example, don't be surprised, that even a 5-year-old or 6-year-old kid could actually tell their parent, dad or mom, should be smoking, because I kind of feel that it's actually bad for the health. And actually, I do see a rising trend in that, simply because they were educated since young. So try to imagine this. If, let's say, every one of us, regardless of whichever background we're from, but as long as we actually educate this thing from the beginning of the education level, they will actually bring this thing throughout the future. And eventually, when generations have actually passed, I kind of believe that we have even more frontliners who will be talking about this, more frontliners who will actually, taken a serious step on a serious note on why this thing is actually very important. And I kind of think that if this thing were to happen, the world field of nuclear weapon wouldn't be far ahead from where we are right now. So I kind of feel that education is definitely something that we need to work towards it. And if it's done right, then in the next few generations to come, this wouldn't be just a mere dream, but this will be something that very tangible and it's actually something very realistic.
Thank you. Yeah, that's an inspiring note, I think, to bring in. And I really hear you, Vincent, in terms of I guess raising that level of awareness, I guess, and that mindset shift, which I kind of like hear you sort of pointing towards that as a way to help advance this issue and to help advance the conversation and the thinking in a direction that is, I guess, overall just healthier and more life-giving and less destructive for us, no matter where we are in the world. And I think, and again, kudos to some of the work that you are doing and the education group is doing in terms of bringing that into a reality. So I think that's really it's a really a strong thing for us to keep in mind. So, and on that note, like I wonder, if we were to think big for a second and think about just really the future of our world, because we are in a place that's, I mean, we're partly responsible for how that for the choices that we make today and our peers make and our and our and the world makes today is sort of laying down the foundation for the future. So I guess what would be like your one prayer or your wish for what that future can look like what's your dream?
Well, I mean, generally speaking, if you to ask what's my dream, I would say that I mean, I'm actually envisioning a very peaceful society where we do emphasize on certain important humanistic values. Like for instance, we have to be nice to others, and which actually coincide with most of the religion out there. The reason why I use most is because I would say that most of the common goodness that we actually have in humankind is actually being preached in there. And another thing that I'm actually envisioning is a world where we can actually talk about things freely. When we say about talk about things freely, it's like every one of us can actually view, share our perspective and not to be controlled by certain parties or maybe people actually twisted certain information. Like the reason why I'm saying that is because, I mean, a couple of years ago, I actually had an engagement with one very enthusiastic youth from Africa. Mm-hmm. So he actually raised a very good point, which I kind of reflect back, like, those who actually in power, right? We kind of have the tendency to actually, I mean, if I were to use a word, I'll use manipulative term in it. Now, reason being because, let's say we were to report, a certain war, maybe a certain fight, which is actually happening in certain part of the world. This is just my personal opinion. If let's say there's actually a war between a third world country and US, for instance, normally when we were to see in the headlines, right, we don't really see people say that, the US Army actually killed people in this war. But instead, what they would do they would actually position themselves as freedom fighters, even though they're actually involved in war. So I kind of feel that this type of terms, or maybe this type of taglines, which actually being used in the different sense, or we use a different word to actually connote it.
Reframing.
That kind of reframing. It's in a sense actually being controlled by certain parties who actually meant to actually create a make-believe kind of society where they believe that things that they're actually doing is actually right. But in reality, right, we do know that killing people is not something that that we should accept at all, because it's just not right in the face of most of the religions out there. So I kind of think that a world that's actually peaceful would actually wouldn't have this type of thing over there, because every one of us would have a certain awareness on why these things shouldn't be there. And every one of us, I hope, that we will have a certain sense of wisdom where we can actually differentiate all these other things. Because, I mean, based on the current environment as well as society which we're actually living here today, right? Not only that we do not really have a certain time for us to actually look back into, or maybe to do certain reflections, but because the world is actually changing so rapidly, which is actually a good thing as well. But at the same time, because we put too much emphasis on the outer world, the external factor, that we tend to lose sense of what is actually important, or rather, like what is meaningful to us. So I kind of feel that in a good society whereby people can actually live with harmony as people, not only that we know what's actually happening, but we ourselves can actually take a certain period of time for us to actually reflect on, like, what can I do better for the society, or
Right.
rather, what can I contribute. So that's the kind of world that I actually envision in the near
Yeah.
future. But I mean, generally speaking, it actually encompasses a world free of nuclear weapon as well.
Right. Right. This, I mean, it goes together, right? Like having a more, I guess the word meaningful is what's coming to mind, right? Like having a more meaningful kind of a um, engagement with the people around us and with our communities and with the world at large, and then also a balanced view of power in terms of there's I mean, COVID-19, for example, has brought forward so many inequalities in our societies all over the world. And there's a lot of, I guess, lessons there for building a more, just as you said, building more harmony into the future, and making sure that all of us have the opportunities that we need to be able to bring forth whatever we have to offer, to our countries, to our communities, and to the world. So, and I really hear you, Vincent, in terms of, nuclear weapons are almost in some ways crippling our ability to be able to do that, as a human community and a human family. So thank you very much for that beautiful vision and that dream. So I guess this is my next question, and we're almost to the end of our chat today. But I'm just curious in terms of your more personal commitment, like really what is it in your um, perhaps in your ethical grounding, or your personal opinion that feels that has you committed to a world without nuclear weapons. And I mean, you've spoken about some of this during our conversation, but if you were to just sort of spotlight that for us, that would be really fascinating to hear.
Yeah. Well, I kind of feel that as long as nuclear weapons still exist, I will definitely dedicate myself to create a level of awareness, and kind of think that this is something that at least within my capacity, or maybe within the capacity of general population, can actually do. Because I mean, when we talk about the impacts of nuclear weapon, they are all facts. It's not theory anymore. It has actually been proven. So any one of us who actually pick this up can actually share to anyone, because information is actually available online with so many resources out there. But again, the only challenge is the priority is not up to the level yet. So I kind of feel that yes, in fact, most of the things can be done. I mean, can only be done on a much more high level, in the sense that we need certain people in certain positions as well as certain powers to actually make certain legislations, like for example the TPNW, to have the governments from different countries to actually sign it and rectify it, to put it into enforcement. Now, besides that, we ourselves, we do have a certain level of responsibility to actually continue on educating people, because again, what I'm actually foreseeing, or maybe something that I might be considering, or maybe the thing is, even though if it's actually being rectified, some of us may actually question, why are you putting priority in the abolition of nuclear weapon and not something else, like for instance social justice and so on, which will actually cause disharmony as well in that part of the country. So my commitment would still be continue to create awareness, and I kind of believe that this thing can not only be done by like Hanin and me, or maybe people from the voices, but as long as we do have this a passion, or maybe we do have a certain idea on the danger of nuclear weapon, we can actually continue on to actually engage with people, actually just do a small dialogue and ask people, hey, what do you think about nuclear weapon? Recently I just watched something from nuclear player voices, So creating awareness, as well as continue on to share the vision that I actually have, a world free of nuclear weapon. So that's a kind of commitment which, at least within my personal capacity, that I feel that I can actually do, and at the same time that I'll be doing. And I do hope that in the near future also, I do have the opportunity to share with people that in higher position, that they may not necessarily be aware of this thing, and I hope that kind of sharing will actually spark a certain interest as well as awareness that they would be doing something within our own community or maybe within our own country.
Thank you, Vincent, for the work that you do, and for joining us today, and for sharing words of inspiration with me and with our listeners. And of course, this video will be available to share through our Instagram account and eventually through YouTube as well in the future. So I wonder if there is one prayer or an intention or a hope, or even a quote, anything that you can leave us with, just some food for thought as we conclude today's fireside chat.
Well, to do that, right, I would like to uh, quote something, because the thing is, the reason why I actually started with this nuclear weapon, the movement, nuclear weapon movement, is simply because of one of my life mentor, which actually took him as my life mentor, is that he was actually born in Japan, and he actually, he had family members who actually experienced the impacts of nuclear weapon during the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So if I were to give a quote, right now, this quote kind of resonates a lot to a lot of the fundamental of most of the issues or maybe some of the challenges that we actually have. To this I quote by Toda. I call him Toda Sensei, Jose Toda. Now he mentioned that in one of the declarations that he actually made is that this is what I quote: although a movement calling for a ban on the testing of nuclear weapons has risen around the world, it is my wish to go further to attack the problem at its roots. I want to expose and rip out the claws that lie hidden in the very depths of such weapon. I wish to declare that anyone who ventures to use nuclear weapons, irrespective of their nationality or whether their country is victorious or defeated, should be sentenced to death without exception. Now, the reason why I use this quote is because of the two things. Number one is because to attack the problem at its root, which when we go back, when we understand the human nature, right, it's all going back to power as well as greed, which I kind of feel that this is something that we could actually manage it into a certain level, but not to actually prioritize into nuclear weapon. But at the same time, those who actually use this nuclear weapon for their own gain, like I said earlier, killing people is not something that is, we should put things to practice. But I kind of feel that the reason why Nanto actually uses it because he wants to express the importance that we actually need to put into the stop, because we wouldn't know how this thing will actually propagate. But I kind of feel that this is something that we should take it seriously, and we should put this thing into our mind, just in case if anything would happen, then we'll be in the right capacity to share with people at the same time, to continue on sharing to the future generation. And this is how I actually agree. So this I'll use this as one of the tagline or reference that actually help us to propel further as to how we can actually solve this or be to put an end to this nuclear weapon.
That's powerful. Thank you. And if you could share the quote, we'll make sure to post it with the video when we put it online. And I'm sure people would want to maybe come back to it and reflect on it, and then take a second read when they can. So thank you, Vincent. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you for joining us from Malaysia so early in the morning. And it's really been a pleasure to hear your story and to learn from your experience. And I hope folks who are watching can, continue to follow Vincent and his work, through his social media channels and through the United Religions Initiative, and continue to offer their support for everything that you're doing. So thank you, Vincent.
Thank you very much, Hanin.
Bye.
Thank you.